and things have learnt to walk that ought to crawl.
My friends and I saw one the night I'm writing this, in the later hours of November 30th and the early morning of December 1st, 2024. We live in southern Arizona and are all staying the night at one friend's house for a birthday party. Her house is known between us all as the haunted house since we're always experiencing weird things there. But this time, right after the sun had set, we were sitting on the porch in the backyard when one of us yelled and pointed at the chest-high brick fence, saying that she just saw a bald, white human head poke itself over the fence. Two of us immediately ran over and looked over the fence to see nothing. We laughed that off, but it was the first sighting of the night. We hung out outside a little longer until we decided to check over the fence again. And while we were doing so, we heard scuttering on the outside of the fence out of view. We joked about it and just went inside instead. Skip to a while later, we went outside again and almost right away, someone saw a head pop up around another fence. Again, we all thought it was nothing, but more of us started seeing a head, hands, and part of a back. At that point, we were scared as hell and started going back inside when one friend stayed back and scared the hell out of us, but she was just standing and looking. We stayed there for a while, now with one friend holding a broom. They lost their broom privileges soon after, and we kept seeing small things of white, and some of the same things from before. Our other friend, previously inside, came out again, which made us all jump, and we all started talking about things we saw and what it could be when we kept seeing things. Eventually, two people heard a growling, and it was very clear. They both weren't faking, and we all ran inside and started panicking, trying to reason with the fact there was a skinny, bald white man crawling outside. We eventually found this, and thank goodness, because, believe it or not, it made us all feel better. This was our story, believe it or not. Do you think it's real? Or are we just crazy teenagers? Anyone ever encounter anything reptilian-like in western North Carolina? The caves are everywhere here in Appalachia. My husband has encountered one years ago and interacted with him. My boyfriend experienced something very strange, and I'm reaching out here to see if anyone else has ever experienced anything similar. This occurred in northwestern North Carolina in 2012. He and his partner at the time were sleeping in bed. They were in a bedroom that had French doors that opened to the backyard, facing a large piece of property, 7 acres, with a stream that comes straight out of the mountain from an aquifer. He awoke randomly and saw 2 red eyes pass by the window of the French doors at somewhere near to 7 to 8 foot off the ground. The door opened as a very intense vibration started, and he sat up to scream and could not hear himself yelling. He could see his cat on the edge of the bed hissing. His partner didn't stir. The vibration caused him to fall back, and he passed out. He woke up face down on the bed with his head turned towards the edge of the mattress. He was unable to move. A figure rose and was completely out of focus a few inches from his face, almost like it was camouflaged. He states its motion was so unnaturally fluid. He could see his surroundings but could not focus on the creature. He explains it as if the creature was out of focus in a photograph. He then unfocused his eyes and used his peripheral vision and was able to see the creature clearly. He states it had brown-green coloring with scales and a worn, pockmarked face, bright red eyes that glowed. When he saw the creature and was able to really decipher what he was looking at, it opened a very large mouth and gave him a gigantic, toothy smile. He says he felt its energy, that it was amused at him for figuring out how to see it. The vibration began again as he watched the creature sink back out of view below the edge of the mattress before passing back out from the frequencies. He awoke several hours later and his partner had no idea anything had occurred. He said the entire time he felt no emotion, no fear, no anger, nothing. He says he knows something violent happened to him and he thinks they wanted to take him but didn't. He had rows of red dots across his back and states it looked like he had laid on a bed of nails. His partner at the time saw the markings as well. He assumes this type of humanoid creature came from underground and travels or lives through the cave systems here. We know there's got to be some sort of opening in the land where the aquifer exits and the water flows down the property. This is his father's property, about 10 acres. We live across the street and I lock my doors out of paranoia now. The correlation between missing persons around cave systems is unsettling, and I wonder if this has anything to do with it. Any similar experiences? Years later in 2024, I laugh and cry at the fact that I now live in the house this happened in. Hello, long-time lurker in here. This happened back in 2009 in Puerto Rico, and we still don't know what it was. So back in 2009, 4 friends and I were walking home from a basketball game in a suburb that is near our neighborhood. It was around 8 p.m. and it was pretty dark. There were 2 ways to get into my neighborhood. The first one was the shortcut, which consisted of cutting through the middle of an abandoned paintball park in an open field, and it would take about 10 minutes to arrive at our homes. Second was the long way, which takes about 25 to 30 minutes, walking in a brightly lit area surrounded by houses and endless illuminated roads that finished right on the entrance of the abandoned park, and then 5 minutes of walking in semi-illuminated areas. We took the shortcut like we did every time, but this time everything was quiet. No animal sounds, no car sounds, just pure silence. One of my friends decides to start talking about how it must be cool to play with a Ouija in the middle of the field as a joke. We tell him to shut up collectively because we were pretty scared. We all see the entrance of the park and we start getting stressed and start talking again. We were about 100 feet from the entrance when we all hear and feel stomps coming from behind us, but not regular stomps, but heavy stomps, like an elephant or a bull running. We looked back and there was this strange shaped creature with really dim red eyes. At first, it looked completely dark, but as it got closer, it was grayish and charging towards us. We collectively looked at each other and we ran as fast as possible towards the entrance and managed to get out. While walking, there is a part of the street that briefly overlooks the field, and we all looked to see if we could see anything. But all we could see was dim red dots looking directly at us. We all went home and the next day tried to figure out what had happened. 4 out of the 5 of us can confirm this story. Sadly, one of my friends passed away a couple of years ago. I also moved, but have to travel every weekend through that area to visit my family. It still gives me the creeps going through there at night. I wanted to share a truly bizarre, terrifying, and unexplainable experience I had growing up. To make note, my childhood home was a hotbed for paranormal activity, I could honestly write a book with the amount of stories I have, but this one was different from all the rest. To start off, we lived on a small stretch of secluded highway in a wooded area. Our home was nestled on a plot of land that was a few acres, and the area surrounding us was federally protected land of the Wildlife Refuge, which means unless your house is grandfathered in, then no one can purchase land or build in this area, so we had no neighbors. Our house was a 300-year-old colonial house and held a bit of history. There was knowledge of Native Americans once residing there, and a lot of war stories, with the Civil and Revolutionary War happening on that land. There was definitely a heavy negative energy in that house and property. You always felt like you were being watched from every angle of the woods, and so many people who visited would become uneasy immediately and state their discomfort in needing to leave. My family and I have countless stories we experienced individually or with one another. This particular experience was shared between myself and two brothers. So, like many nights after dinner, my dad would tell me, or one of my brothers, to go out back and feed the dog. This was a scary task because it would be pitch black and our dog would be near the tree line of woods, which, for some reason, that section of woods would give us all an uneasy feeling any time we went near it. And it didn't matter the time of day, it was always creepy. But being at night was definitely terrifying. So no matter which one of us was told to go out and feed the dog, we would never leave a man behind and would always go out in a trio because we knew better than that, because we wouldn't want to be left to go alone when it came for our turn. So on this particular night, I was probably around 11 years old, my brothers being 10 and the other 7. We would always do the same thing. So whoever was told by Dad to feed the dog, they were the one who had to carry the bowl out, and the other two would huddle close with the person with the bowl in the middle. We would walk extremely slow, all of us looking in different directions, surveying the property, but keeping the conversations very light-hearted and being silly to keep from getting scared before completing the task. Once we reached our dog, this is where the person holding the bowl would get screwed, because right before you had the chance to put it down, the other two siblings would scream something scary like Jeepers Creepers or the Jersey Devil, while hauling their ass back to the house. So you would be left standing alone before getting the chance to run with your siblings. So on this night, my brother was the one who had to hold the bowl, and as we walked out to head towards the backyard, something felt off, like the air felt static and charged, like how it feels before a lightning storm. We could hear our dog barking like crazy, which was unusual, and as we got into sight of our dog, we see him standing on his hind legs, with a leash pulled completely tight, because whatever he was barking at, he was trying with all he had to break out from the collar and go after it. That's when we heard loud branches snapping and looked towards the direction our dog was barking in. We then see this giant, black stick figure that was as tall as the trees. It was walking over this huge brush pile we had, which was why we were hearing branches breaking. The way it walked was almost mechanical in a way, and its presence felt very ominous and gave us a very dreadful feeling. At first, it seemed like it didn't notice us and was just walking by, but then it turned towards us, and that's when we booked it for the house, my brother throwing the bowl of food in the air and feeling like our legs were jello. We all saw the same thing, and it scared us so badly. Unlike many stories you hear, my parents actually believed us. Anyway, fast forward years and years later, and I was having a conversation with my co-worker. We would talk about paranormal topics quite a bit. So during this conversation, she asked me if I had ever heard of the Native American stick people. And as soon as she said it, I knew what she was referring to. She then tells me about these giant stick figures out in the woods that Native Americans have seen and are supposedly a totem of evil spirits And if you encounter one and it goes after you, it can then possess you and cause you to do harm. I was freaked out because up until then, I'd never heard of such a thing. But knowing the Native American history of that land, it makes me believe that they are related. It's been 10 years since this happened, but the event is something that stuck with me, and I want to share. In 2014, I was sent to a summer camp to study German near the Munich Alps. The location was remote. The only way out was a bus stop on the other side of a lake, located near a hotel and an abandoned church, the only other buildings there. The Wi-Fi at the time was really in its infancy at the camp, while mobile signals would come and go. Typically, you would have half a bar, and, if lucky, one bar. The camp was surrounded by mountains, and if you wanted to get out by foot, you had to hike upwards and then hike 15 to 20 kilometers through the thicket. The weather would change considerably quickly, from rain to fog to clear blue. The summer camp had 6 staff members for a group of 30 students, ranging in age from 13 to 17. I was 14 at the time, and was lucky with the group I had. I surrounded myself with a few Americans, Australians, and Russians, who were good company, but I lost contact over the years. They were French and mostly Spanish students. The majority of my time there was amazing, hiking for 8 to 9 hours through the mountains, swimming in the lake, and making campfires, shooting bows, playing ball. It was the best summer of my life. Skipping to week 2, to the event which would change the way I looked at the place, even up to today. It was a very dreadful day from that morning, as the rain was heavy and the wind was blowing the fog into the valley. It was max 10 degrees, maybe 11, but I still can't believe we continued hiking in those conditions. No one was against it. The hike was miserable, as we walked up in elevation, but it all went well until the descent, when the staff members told us we couldn't continue the hike and needed to go back. During the descent, I started to get this sickening feeling of being watched, but it eventually disappeared after we got back to camp. Once in camp, I was talking to one of the guys in my room about it, but he shrugged it off and said, "You probably just caught a cold or something." As time went on, the rain finally stopped, and we were all gathering to start a campfire around 5 to 6 p.m. All was good, and everyone was enjoying themselves. One of the guys, Mike, brought out his large lumen flashlight, which lit up the forest tree line to the right side of the camp. At this time, the fog started to flood the camp and the lake, but no one really cared as it looked cool from what I remembered. Some were running into the distance and back for photos. I asked Mike if I could borrow his light. A few minutes went by, while moving the light from right to left. I jokingly muttered, "Imagine if something jumped out of the woods." As I flashed the light to my left, a white figure silhouette was walking towards the woodline. I shouted, "Mike, look, you see that?" To my horror, he had already started shouting for everyone to look. As everyone in the courtyard looked, the figure stopped and turned its head, revealing its yellow, glowing eyes. I couldn't tell whether it was eyeshine from the light or its own glow. Its arms were long, super long, similar to an ape, going down to knee level. The overall appearance was muscular, but athletically slim. The face I couldn't make out from the distance of 40 meters. It then started walking again, as a staff member ran to get others as his phone didn't work. All of this happened within a few seconds. As this was happening, the creature looked back at the forest and ran uphill. The speed at which it ran would make a deer look slow. It was fast, a rough estimate of 40 to 50 miles per hour. It could have easily taken out all of us and then gotten into the building. As this happened, the staff members arrived and huddled us inside, telling us to lock all doors and windows and to stay indoors after 6 p.m. The time I imagine was at this point 8:30 to 9 p.m, roughly speaking. We huddled in our rooms as each member did a room check of everyone who should be inside. The night was long as half the camp started to discuss what we saw and puzzle it together. There were noises on the roof and tapping throughout the night, but we didn't see anything as it was pitch darkness. The following morning came and the courtyard was covered in small rocks and sticks thrown about. The big changes were in the weekly timetable. The hikes were all either shortened or completely cancelled. The staff then held a large meeting to announce that we couldn't go outside a certain radius of the camp as we did before, and we needed to be in groups of 6 to be outside. After that, even when going out and walking around, everything felt off, and the world seemed a lot more hostile than what I had experienced 2 weeks ago. Some cut the camp short and went home. Others waited for the week to end. I left that following week, even when my mum wanted me to stay an extra week, which I declined. Moving to a year later, I revisited the camp for 2 weeks as I enjoyed my initial time up until the event. Also, it was a good language school. Once I arrived, I noticed they had built an electrical fence around the whole perimeter of the camp. I was unfortunate enough to get shocked accidentally by it several times, as it would turn on during the evening to early hours and turn off during the day. The staff said it's to keep the cows at bay, which I had never seen walking in that area before and during this time. The time to go indoors was 7 p.m, no longer 9 or 10 p.m. like last year. Cameras were installed around the area. The groups were still a thing. Things were getting stricter and more alert, but those 2 weeks went by without much happening. If there are questions, I would be happy to answer. Sorry for the long build-up, and apologies for the grammatical mistakes. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.